Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Polyhedron Collider cast, episode 142. I'm Steve Tudor.
I'm Sid Gill.
And I'm Rory Summers. Happy birthday to
Whoa, I'm not paying the rights for that.
Okay, which is just happy birthday, Polyhedron Collider, because you, what's the correct terminology here? Us?
I don't know what the podcast pronouns are.
Why is that not a thing? Why is that not a thing?
It's an it. It's an it.
But it is how many years old now, Steve?
Well, it is now 8 years old.
8 years.
So to put it into context, a little over 8 years ago. Oh, I should probably mention, you'll notice you haven't heard Andy's voice yet. That's because he's currently in Japan. And we could have waited until he's coming back, but he's basically been winding us up with photographs all week about his trip to Japan. So
we're recording with that.
Yeah. Yes, just a little over 8 years ago, I entered a competition with the Secret Cabal gaming podcast to write a line for their 12 Games of Christmas song.
Okay.
And I won. Oh. I can't remember for the life of me what my entry was, because it's 8 years ago. I can barely remember what I did yesterday, never mind 8 years ago. But it won, and I won a prize, and I got an email, Chris Miller of Secret Cabal, asking me what I would like, and there was a list of 12 games to choose from, and I chose Pandemic Legacy Season 1.
Right.
At the time when it was just Pandemic Legacy, to be fair, Season 1 was, it's that retro thing, like the old Episode 1, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so 8 years ago, roughly about the day this comes out, I can't remember the exact date, and then I can't promise when this is going to go out either, but about 8 years ago, me, Andy, and John sat down, played some Pandemic Legacy, and then stuck a microphone in front of us and started recording.
Wow.
And I didn't realise it was 8 years until you and I finished that campaign.
Yes, we did.
2 weeks ago, and I looked at the dates on the back and went, oh my God, that means the podcast is 8 years old because we recorded on the first day we played the first game.
Yeah, I think you said it was February. So yeah, when this comes out, it'll be within days of the first episode launching.
February 2016. So it's taken us 8 years to finish Pandemic Legacy Season 1.
Yeah, a triumphant ending though, I think. But
I think we did particularly well, actually, yes.
But happy birthday, 8 years. I was thinking, does that make Polyhedron Collider one of the longest running UK board game podcasts? Because I don't think there are many that are older. Shut Up and Sit Down will be older.
Yeah. And I'm pretty sure Who Dares Rolls will be older. We're Not Wizards started, I think, like 2 weeks after us.
And obviously No Put Included, they started after as well.
Yeah.
But I think
no idea. No idea is the short answer.
No? Okay.
No.
But if there was like to be a Mount Rushmore of UK podcasters, we'd probably be in there.
The idea of my face desecrating an Indian hereditary site is just a weird view, isn't it?
I was going to suggest we do Dover, but
I don't like where this is going. This is weird. This is going to a weird place, Rory.
Yeah.
Sorry. I'll get back to games then. We finished off Pandemic Legacy Season 1, and we played 3 games in like 2.5 hours.
We did. We smashed it.
Because as soon as we finished one, we were desperate to reset it up and carry on.
Yeah.
And it was a reminder of why Pandemic Legacy is such an awesome game. It really did want you to play the next game.
Yeah, you are driven to set it up. And I think there's that really clever thing of once you finish a game, it's actually faster to set up the next game than it is to pack away Pandemic Legacy.
Yes.
We could put it away and play something else, or 80% of the setup's done. So let's just go again.
Yeah.
Which sounds silly, but that's a really clever way of just keeping that game on the table.
Mm. And if you stop, apparently you need 6 years before you come back to it.
Well, yes.
New blood came in. New blood.
Yes.
And
new motivation.
New motivation. But yeah, we played a 3-player game. And we trounced it. Was it 3 players? Yeah, it was.
Yes, with 3 players, yeah.
And we won 3 months in a row.
Which, considering we'd lost 4 times in a row before then, but we played it 4-player before then, and I think it's one of those games, the more players you have, the more difficult it gets.
You've said that before, actually, about pandemic games.
I think it's the more people you have, the more chance there is of someone doing something that is, I'm going to say suboptimal, but it means that they're not doing it because they're doing it because they want to, and sometimes defiantly so.
Yeah.
You don't want someone telling you how to play Pandemic, so you say, well, I'm not doing what you're telling me to do. I'm going to go over here and do this.
Yeah, which is, I think, a critique or criticism of Pandemic, is that certain roles within the game almost have quite prescribed things they do.
Yeah, you lose a bit of that agency that you might want, don't you?
I was playing one of the games, I was playing as the medic, and we'd cured one of the diseases. So it's like, well, I could take my turn and do some stuff, but really, I should just go in. Because like, I was at a point where I could, walking through a city would immediately cure it. I suppose, well, I'll spend my 4 times just walking around the Middle East then, I guess. It makes some turns very, very boring to play. But it's only when you have that character, and it's only in very particular circumstances.
I'd say it's common of a lot of co-ops, though. I think a lot of co-ops suffer for that. If you've got a specialty and your character obviously needs to do something, then you're going to want to do it.
Yeah. But no, that was it. But we played this. Quick update then is we played this as part of our BG 100 challenge.
No, how are you getting on with that?
We are. I've updated the graph today.
Ooh.
I've done a 100% stacked bar chart, color coded and everything, and we are 2 games ahead of the curve. On 8 games, we're 2 games ahead of the curve. So we're doing all right.
It's been quite interesting. So the games we played so far, which we'll probably go into 1 or 2 of them in a bit more detail in a bit, but of course we played Pandemic Legacy Season 1, so we played 3 games of that. We played Tainted Grail last night, so we played a couple of
2
quests
chapters
of Tainted
of
Grail.
Yeah.
We've played Azul.
We played a few
Puerto
games
Rico.
of that. Yeah, Puerto Rico,
played a few games of it. We played Puerto Rico. We've played
Obsession,
which we played on BG Board Game Arena.
Yep.
And I'm already forgetting what the other games we played are. We've got
Terraforming Mars.
Oh yeah, Terraforming Mars, of course.
Of course you forgot we played that.
I forgot we played Terraforming Mars. I can't believe I've already wiped that from my memory. Oh my god, yes. I have actually completely forgot we did that, yeah.
And Seven Wonders Duel. We got that with it, yeah.
Seven Wonders Duel, yes. Well, let's start with Terraforming Mars, because obviously I don't rate it very much because I've already forgotten I've played it in the last 4 weeks, which is not good. Now, we have always said, me and Andy have kind of poked fun at Terraforming Mars and called it terribly boring farce. But this is your first time playing it, Rory.
It was my first experience of Terraforming Mars, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it quite a lot. I
thought you might.
Yeah, it is. I think what I like about the game is that I want to say it's like a sequential. It's almost got this sequential narrative that you're going to set yourself up and you're going to flow through these actions. And once you understand how that works and how it's going to operate, the game just ticks along really quite smoothly. You don't have much agency about what cards you're going to get in your hand, but you build up an engine and then you look for those synergies and how they're going to start to work together to drive you forward. And I think that's the part of the puzzle I like. I can see why people say it's very similar to Ark Nova. It has that same... Mechanically, it's very different, but it has the same flow to it. And
it has the massive deck of cards which affect your gameplay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's how you pivot and how you change and how you adapt to those things. I quite like the little bit of player interaction to it. I really like the fact that they have 3 different cubes that are used to track absolutely everything. I thought that was fantastic, as opposed to having, here are some steel or titanium cubes, and here are some earth cubes, and here are some tree cubes. No, it's just one thing tracks everything. That was really nice. Very old school. I quite like that.
Well, bizarrely, actually, last night when playing Tainted Grail, I was reminded how interesting that did that, in that the cubes were used to track everything in that, more or less. And it's the same red cubes for absolutely everything. And I thought, this is a game full of bling. You've got these miniatures, you've got these, 4-inch high men here which dominate the board, and then everything's tracked just by really simple cubes, and where it sits on your board, just like Terraforming Mars, is what that cube is. I was like, yeah, didn't need food tokens and magic tokens, just use a cube in the right spot.
Yeah, I really like, and for someone who I really like blinging out my board games, I found that minimalist approach to that to be really good. So I enjoyed it. I think it's going to be interesting is that when we get to the end or closer to the end of this challenge is whether we think it deserves to be in the top 100.
Can we make that call now, or do we have to wait until we've played?
I think you should make the call now, and then I think
okay,
you should reflect upon it after you get to the end.
Yeah, okay.
I think that's what's going to be interesting when you get to the end of this challenge is whether you're... It's almost like you should put it in an envelope like we did there. So you should put your thoughts in an envelope now so that when you come back and look at it in a year's time with everything else that's happened, does it change your opinion? Because have you grown... You know,
well, it's interesting. I mean,
it says a performance review. This does say.
I had one today. You see, but
I am tracking like thoughts and impressions from the games on the Polyhedron Collider Board Game Geek Guild, so that they're all there like post play reports. But so you were asking me now to tell you. Recorded whether I think Terraforming Mars belongs in the top 100 games.
I think I would like to know both of your opinions on it.
I'll tell you what, let's reword it. Would it sit in your top 100 games?
No.
Because I think that's the kind of differential, isn't it? Because I know lots of people like Broken Meeple, Luke Hector, and the guys from Dice Tower often do like their own personal top 100s. I know Luke, for instance, updates it every year. Mm-hmm. I'm pretty sure Tom Vassell and all them do as well. I haven't followed Dice Tower in a while, I must admit. But I've never thought of doing that. I think I've done my top 10 once.
Yeah.
And I think I may have put it on the Polyhedron Collider blog about 15 years ago or whenever it was, just after we started. But yeah, my personal view is I enjoyed that game of Tend to Grow with you more than I've ever done in the past.
Yeah.
And it did make me go, this isn't as bad as I've been making out on this podcast. However, there are still, I think, easily 100 other games that I will play before I play before I play Terraforming Mars again.
I mean, I was thinking about this, is that I discovered Castles of Burgundy last year. You know, after however many years of being in this hobby, I only played Castles of Burgundy for the first time last year. And I played that game and I instantly was, wow, that is a great game. Same with Zolkin. I only played that for the first time last year as well. First play, wow. Brass, again, same reaction. I played Terraforming Mars and I was like, this is all right. It wasn't, I didn't have a wow reaction to it. And I think that the BGG top 100 games should be wow. Yeah.
And you know what other game didn't cause a wow? And that was when both of you, because both of you played this. We played it in real life, in person, and then the following night, we played it at Board Game Arena, and we played Azul. And I like Azul, and I didn't realise it was in the top 100. And the two of you just kind of went, yeah, that's a game.
It happened.
It's very pretty. It looks nice.
Yeah. It was, I think
20 minutes, half an hour of, I don't want my time back. It was fine.
Yeah.
But it was a game.
Yeah. Completely unspectacular, that game. I was 100% whelmed by Azul.
I have a view on the top 100 of anything. I think a top 100 of anything is usually average. The stuff in it is usually average. There might be a couple of standouts, like really crap, really good, but generally, you get enough people in a room together, you're going to average it out.
You are. That's a good point.
Yeah, okay.
I reckon it mushes itself together, and the peaks and the troughs of opinion just get averaged. So I don't think you'll find games which will blow your socks off, really, in there.
So you say that, but I do think there are a lot of games that do deserve to be on that list. And I think there are games that do blow my socks off when I play them.
Yeah, but that's just the slope of averageness, isn't it?
Yeah,
you are going to. Yeah, if you played 100 random games, some of those games are going to blow your socks off.
Exactly. Some will be a little bit above it. Some will be a little bit below it. But in general, I think you're going to get a meh opinion on, I reckon, 75% of the games.
Yeah, okay.
That's what me. This is my prediction for the end of the year when you start looking through it and go, yeah, there was, if you went out and picked a 10, would you be able to get 25 absolute bangers out of that list?
Oh.
Well, what was 25, you reckon?
Can you get 25 absolute fantastic,
bangers.
Amazing games?
I confidently say yes.
Okay. This is going to be interesting. This is going to be an exciting adventure. I can't wait for it to see it unfolding.
Because I think we've played one absolute banger already. Pandemic Legacy Season 1, which you mentioned, that was an absolute banger.
Yeah.
So,
agreed.
Yeah.
Love that. Really, 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 really fun game.
Yeah. So, one game actually, Sid, you did play. Because we've actually not talked about the games which are on our games we talked about listed, which is quite interesting. So one game we actually set aside to talk about, because this is the first time you've played this, and I believe this is the first time you've played this, Rory.
Correct.
Now, I have played this game before. It was 12 years ago, which might give you a hint of how old this game is. It's in the top 100. It was on Board Game Arena we played it, because none of us own a physical copy. And that game is Puerto Rico. And I said, I played it 12 years ago, which I found based on... I've been keeping stats, it seems, for over 12 years because I've got stats that say exactly when I played that and who I played it with, which means I put that onto Board Game Geek before the BG Stats app
Manually
came out.
put that on.
Manually, yes. And I remember being, to recoin the phrase, whelmed by that game. I think I'd even rated it 5 on Board Game Geek.
I think 5 is a solid score for a whelmed game.
But we played it again. And I thought it was freaking great.
I really, really enjoyed it. And the thing that for me was, I think I'd gone into a bit kind of, this is going to be a bit of a chore. I'm just helping the boys out here. I'm just joining, you're making up the numbers to play a game.
Sid Gill is doing his homework. Shocker.
I felt like I was just, filling a chair. But you know what? I really got into it. I didn't enjoy the theme of it. I thought that was irrelevant, but I enjoyed the player interaction. I enjoyed getting angry at you lot when you would just get in my way, steal the tile I want or something like that. I really enjoyed it.
Fill in the ship that you want. So I should probably say for those that haven't played this, a lot of people haven't played this. So Puerto Rico is quite an old game.
2002.
2002. So it is a game in which you are basically running plantations in Puerto Rico. So you can see from a theme point of view, this doesn't go down well in modern circles, shall we say, especially when you consider that one of the actions is to bring colonists, in air quotes, on a big ship, and they're represented by dark brown
discs.
Discs. Yeah. But the basic gist of the game is you plant plantations, you put workers on the plantations to run them, you then build buildings that process those plantation materials into the final product, which go into barrels. Then you try and ship those barrels off. I say try because that's where the real meat of this game is that there are, I think, 5 different products, but only 3 ships. And only one product can go on a ship, so you can't mix and match at any point.
And the ships also have various capacities. You have a 4 ship, a 5 ship, and a 6 ship.
So, for instance, if I've got like 7 barrels of coffee, I'm never going to do all 7. But if then suddenly someone fills up them with indigo, cotton, and sugar, then I'm never going to ship my coffee. And there's limits to how much I can keep in my warehouse once the ships leave the port. The really cool thing about the game is it's based on an action selection. So every turn you'll take an action from those that are available. I think there are 5 or 6, depending on the number of players in the game. It does vary from the number of players. And that means it's full of, you bastard, you took the action I wanted to take, or you bastard, you took the ship I wanted to take because you took the action I wanted to take before I could, and now I've got a warehouse full of sugar, which is just going to get dumped in the sea. And
exactly, because it's the timings of when those actions trigger is really important.
Yep.
And you want them to happen in this order, but other players who are all slightly out of sync And if you get an action to go to do the captain action, which is load the ships, if you do that before you're ready to, it screws you over. And it's the what's the other good one? The one that runs your plantation. You get
production action.
The production action. I need that one. In a minute, I need to do this action first. And of course, when you choose the action, you get a bonus. You get a bonus for running the action. Everybody else still gets to do it. So everybody gets to produce, but if I choose production, I get a bonus. If I get more colonists, I get an extra 1 or 2. If I'm the captain, I get extra victory points and I get first pick about which ship is going to take which goods. It was really bitter. It was a really bitter game between the three of us. And it made it really interesting.
But the game was really good, though. I really enjoyed how quickly it came together. It only took a couple of rounds for it to kind of slot in, to see what I needed to do, to get angry at you lot dicking me over by producing too quickly or whatever, filling a ship with some crap that didn't need to be in that ship. I thought it was a really, really simple game in terms of to learn it, but behind it, the strategy of winning was quite complex, because you had to weave in somebody else's nonsense. You had to recover quite quickly, and I enjoyed having to recover from somebody pulling the ship action early, or earlier than I was ready. And you almost had to kind of prepare and hedge a little bit as well, thinking, oh, look at Steve's doing that, right? Okay, he's going to probably need a ship soon, so I need to sort of plan for him to dick me, but then not be dicked.
One thing I kind of thought about, as I said, I played this a long time ago, and even then I played it like a good 10 years after it had come out. But I remember that game taking an hour, and there's next to no setup.
No.
You just stick some things in some piles. And it did make me wonder whether some of these modern Euros, I mean, we may talk about some today, we may not, depend on how much time we've got, that don't seem to pack as much game into such a smaller package. There's something awfully simple. I mean, you said it was simple to learn because it was basically the actions are those action cards, and there's not much else to it because everything is kind of built into them. And it did make me think, wow. I mean, I remember used to go into game night, and you used to play 3 or 4 games in a night. You know, you'd play Puerto Rico, and somebody would pack Puerto Rico away while someone's unpacking out and setting up another game. Whereas what happens now is we come to game night and we set up Tainted Grail and we play that until, Jesus Christ, we should really go home and go to bed kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it does weirdly make me think, have we lost something in board game design? We might get it onto later, the imblingification of games and this bigger and better, and have we lost a little something there? But yeah, I am wondering whether I now pick up this game out to my collection. The only reason I haven't immediately gone out and got it is because I ran out of room sometime in 2020.
Because it's just been the maths trade here in the UK as well. And there were a number of copies of Puerto Rico, and I was quite keen to try and get my hands on it. Unfortunately, no one wanted to swap with me. But there's a later edition that came out a few years ago, which has got improved artwork and some new some slight asymmetry as well. I'm tempted to go pick it up, but Puerto Rico is a type of game I think you have to play it at 3 players minimum.
Yes.
I think at 2 players that game is going to fall really, really flat. If you can even play it at 2 players.
It packed a hell of a wallop though.
It did. It was really, really
for the amount
game.
of fun it gave us. It earned its right to be on that table. I think, you know what, I wouldn't buy it because I don't like the theme. I think it's a really dull, drab theme, and the colours are all grey and faded, right? But if somebody reskinned this as a spaceships thing, right, where you're bootlegging stuff to Mars or something like that, man, I'd be on it like a shot. That's all it's crying out. It's crying out for a little bit of a reskin.
Yeah.
Throw some robots in it. I don't know. It'd be amazing.
Yeah, you don't even have to go very particularly far with the theme, do you?
No.
You just change Puerto Rico to Titan.
Exactly. There you go. We're halfway there. We're halfway there.
Yeah.
Different space barges. So we don't even need to could just be barges. Be beautiful.
Change the colonists to robots, as you just said.
Water.
Yeah.
Water would be one of the resources that we'd have to mine and cart around the place.
We're halfway there, guys.
We're halfway there. We could do this. We could do this.
Do we want to talk about other games that we played recently that have a really interesting theme that Sid didn't like.
Well, now you're going to have to.
No, you've started it. You've set the segue up. Now.
Okay. Well, we also played Obsession.
It's that. Okay, that's not on the list. You're right. Yes.
Yeah. Oh, yes, of course we did. Yeah. No, yeah. Yeah, let's talk about Obsession. Do we have to? Do we have to talk about Obsession?
I was actually reluctant to talk about Obsession because I kind of wanted to play it again. I think
let's play it some more before we talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, because I enjoyed it, but then again, I think I saw through the Matrix on that one.
Well, you doubled my score, didn't you?
Well, yeah.
And it wasn't my first time playing Obsession, so I haven't even got that as an excuse.
Right, okay, let's move away from this top 100 list and talk about some other games. We really should talk about The Gig. And I know it's not the usual way I introduce games on this podcast, but I've got to say it like that. We really need to talk about The Gig. So The Gig is a dice rolling game, which I backed on Kickstarter. Mm-hmm. And it took a while to arrive. There were some issues with the publishing. Braincrack Games are having issues, and I get the feeling, based on what the announcement was on the Kickstarter, that Braincrack Games may not be here once this once this is finished being sent out to everyone. Now, let's explain what the game is first before we get to the proper fly in the ointment that is this game. So The Gig is a roll and write, but it's like a instantaneous roll and write.
Real-time roll and write, that's it, yeah.
Real-time roll and write. So you have a piece of music, which is a grid, which represents 6 dice, and then there are symbols. And so each dice is a stave of music, so a line going horizontally across. The idea is you roll dice and you place them on these covering notes, and those notes give you the things you cross off on your roll and write. What's different, or maybe different, maybe I don't know how different it really is you're doing this simultaneously. So you're rolling the dice and you keep rolling until you get what you want and you place it on. And then the whole thing is when you count in to go to the start, you're meant to do it like a beat, like 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then you take it to the bridge. The first person who's put all the dice down shouts, take it to the bridge, and then people have to work and do things after that. The other thing is as well, each person has a different instrument. The instrument is another card. You cross things off, and that's really where you're going to score quite a few of your points, because you're trying to make patterns as well as getting symbols. The patterns get marked off on your instrument.
Yeah.
And they get you bonus points and bonus symbols.
And that pattern matches the dice placement, doesn't it? So you put your dice in a particular T shape or a cross shape, and then you can cross off that cross shape on your instrument, and that's going to give you more bonus points and more bonuses. Yeah.
And then you do that. You do a set list. So you do a collection of 6 songs.
Yeah.
And at the end of it, you tot up your points based on the things you've got. I also got to mention one of the things you can collect, some of the symbols, are bonuses, like instant effects, which you can use to manipulate the die. I think they're completely useless because the game is play as fast as possible. So by the time you've looked at your board, looked at your power-ups, crossed your power-up and changed your dice, someone has taken the thing you wanted anyway. Yeah. The only time they ever became useful is when someone has already taken to the bridge and you're the last person to place a die and you can still legally place one. Yeah. Then you go, well, now I'm here, I'm going to use a power-up to change it. The rest of the time, they were a complete waste of time and actually were a detriment to use it. You were quicker just rolling the dice to see what you're trying to get, what you want to get.
The thing about this game, you can just keep re-rolling the dice. So if you know you need 1s, 2s and 3s, when you roll a bunch of 4, 5s and 6s, you pick them up and roll them again. But the more times you roll, obviously it's going to slow you down, and it only takes Sid to gets what he wants on the first roll to just say, take it to the bridge. And then you're left with the chaff.
Yeah.
Which is a problem of real-time games. We'll say problem. It's a thing about real-time games.
It's a challenge, should we say.
So, I thought it was quite interesting. Sid's little smirk on his face as you were going through that description there, Steve.
I find it really interesting listening to this, because I remember talking about this after we played it. I don't feel as passionately angry as you two do.
Well, there's a reason for that.
And that's, I think, is an important part of this conversation.
What I would like you to do, Sid, is I think me and Rory cannot pass comment on this game for the reasons we'll get to in a few minutes. So I think you first should pass judgment on this game.
Okay, I thought it was fine. I didn't find it a bad game. I didn't find it a great game. I didn't like it, but I didn't get upset at it either. So for me, it was a roll and write with a bit of race in it. That's what I took away from it. I didn't like the race element. I think it took away from the roll and write element of the game, if I'm honest. But I could see why it was there. It made sense for that kind of game to have a bit of, I suppose, competitiveness, a bit of racing. But I felt like I'd be beaten. I would always get beaten in that game by somebody who's played it before.
Yeah.
And therefore, it became if you owned that game, no matter who you played it with, you would win. Because you knew what the power-ups did, you could quicker, you'd be faster. It became a game of how much have you played it. But so at longer term, that's why I don't want to go back to it. But no, it was all right. I mean, it was 20 minutes.
Yeah,
it was
I can't get angry at a game for being 20 minutes long. It was 20 minutes. It filled the hole before I had to go home. Yeah, it was all right.
Okay.
Do you know what? I agree with that assessment. It was all right. I do agree with that. It's not my kind of game. It's not the kind of game I want. So, dear listener, you may be asking, why, Stephen, did you back this on Kickstarter then? So for that, we need to pass on the story to Rory and to tell us what happened in 2018, Rory.
I went and sat down at the Breakcrack Games stand at the UK Games Expo, and I played The Gig. And I was quite looking forward to this because it was meant to be a dice placement game around being in a jazz band. I thought that sounds like an interesting theme, bit different, and I like dice placement games. So I sat down and I played this gig, and you get your initiatives and then you roll your dice. And the really interesting thing about this game is you've got the score sheet in the middle. The book opens up and it is it's more like a Sudoku style board, double page in the rule book. And it looks almost like, what's it called? It's not a sonograph, but you know the way like Audacity does. It has all the picks and spikes.
Yeah, like a waveform.
Waveform, that's the word. So it had like a waveform in cubes, and you had to put down dice, go from start to end to do this. And the interesting thing was, although we were competing against each other, we were all in the same band. So we have to complete the song. You have to go from the beginning to the end, and you have to try and fill as many of the peaks and troughs as possible. And you have to put down particular colours or particular numbers in particular locations. But you also wanted to keep some of the dice back because you had your own little personal board, which was your solo board. Because you're in a jazz band, you want to break out a bit of your sax solo or the bass solo, and you want to try and get some of the fan attention, because that's how you get fans and you get applause, you get esteem, and you make yourself the best in the band. You essentially become the front man of the jazz band. So that was the whole idea of the game. So it had this really clever thing about where you put the dice, whether you put them on your board or you put them on this collaborative board, but everybody is kind of driven to go, right, you have to do a bit of both, and you have to be clever about where you put your dice. It was still a fairly light game, and it was still a fairly quick game, but it had this collaborative, competitive aspect to it. Dice placement, dice manipulation, a little bit of rolling and writing. There was still that little, the dry eraser board. And it was a really different, interesting game. And that's why I played it. And that is the review that you can read over on polyhedroncollider.com.
You've just described a completely different game to what we played.
Yeah, we did.
And it is on me. It is my fault.
Mm-hmm.
Rory wrote this review. I love the sound of it. But Rory was not the only person who loved this. Some of our friends also played it and said they loved it. So when it hit Kickstarter, I just insta-backed, especially at the price point. Saw that price point, went, well, that's punt territory, insta-back. And I foolishly did not actually look at the Kickstarter. Because the artwork from that demo Rory played is the same as the artwork in the game I currently own. Yet it's a completely different game.
It is.
So it's the same name, same publisher, same artwork, same graphic style. Yet it is a completely different game.
The thing that when Rory was just telling us about what he played, the big difference appears to be that common waveform.
Yeah.
It's a completely different game. Although there's some roll and write elements, as Rory said, if you just have to look at the two pictures of these next to each other, and maybe we'll put these pictures on the Facebook page after we put the podcast out, because there's a top-down view. It's like a promo shot of the board in the centre and the player boards at the side. And if you look at that compared to the promo shot that was on the Kickstarter page for the gig, you can tell it's a completely different game. And I said, I'm a fool here, and I'm angry at myself for not checking this. But I also feel angry that it's a completely different game with the same name and the same coloured dice with the same musical notation on them and the same graphical style from the same publisher, yet it's a completely different game. And I'm angry. I said I'm angry at myself, but I'm also angry at the publisher for basically doing a bait and switch from what we played at the expo to what the Kickstarter is. Now, in their defence, the Kickstarter is for the game I got.
Yeah.
And I'm an idiot. So that is why I shouldn't be passing my opinion on this game, because I am instantly angry that this is not the really interesting game that Rory and our other friends demoed. This is instead a pretty bog standard roll and write.
No, I wouldn't go that far. I'd say it's all right. I think there's roll and writes which are better than all right. I think this is just it's the bottom end of all right. It's it's fine for 20 minutes, but it's you should be angry at yourself, Steve, a little bit, because you got sucked in by the name and the previous history.
I didn't really look at the Kickstarter. I just thought, oh, this is an instaback, especially for the price.
Yeah, I mean, I was really excited to because I knew Steve backed it, and having played it, I was really keen. And Steve was there, right? Okay, how do we play? Let's go. Open the rule book. Opens this songbook, and I was like, that's different. That's what the hell was that? That is, and I understand that games have to go through this development cycle, this development process, but it's so far away from what I saw. And I don't think it does. It's not nearly as interesting. It's almost like it's feeding a completely different market within the board game players. The one I played, I mean, can you think of many games that have like that are collaboratively competitive? I think that in itself is really interesting. Where's that game gone?
I'd love to know where that game's gone. Yeah. That's the really interesting one. I'd love to know where that game's gone.
Yeah.
It's an all right game, as you put it, Sid, but this is a mystery. This is a board game mystery to me. There's something changed somewhere along the line to make such a drastically different game. And you can see the images on Polyhedron Collider on that review, and you can see that it's very different to what we're playing at the moment. So yeah, that's the gig from Braincrack.
If anybody wants a copy, slightly used one going in the West Midlands.
There will be, yeah. Check your favourite board game trading places.
It's all right, guys. It's not that bad. Don't let him put you off. Don't rush out and buy it, but if somebody puts it on the table, give it a punt. It's all right.
It'll do for 20 minutes.
That should be on the side of the box. It'll do.
It'll do for 20 minutes. Right then, boys. Should we talk about something completely different?
How completely different? Because we've only been recording 42 minutes and we've already covered 5 games. See how fast we are without Andy. See how much ground we've covered.
Dragging us down, isn't he? Something completely different, Sid. What's completely different to a jazz band-based dice rolling game?
Arrakis.
Yeah.
And that takes us quite neatly onto Dune RPG, which
That's one of our worst segues ever. I'm sorry,
terrible, mate. It's absolutely terrible to the point where I feel like we should be cutting that out. But now we've gone down this rabbit hole, we have to admit
I think this now needs to be a running joke. So when we can't think of a segue, we just say what's completely different, and then we just say the name of the thing we want to talk about.
That path.
Yeah.
I don't even remember where we were segueing from to even go back and try again. This is what happens when you get old.
This is staying in. I'm not quitting all this. This is gold. So, Sid, what are we talking about?
Well, I think it's about time. It's been a few months now since we've talked about an RPG, Steve.
I think that's a very good opportunity to talk about.
You and I have just come off the back of an RPG that we've been looking forward to for quite a while to play. Because we played the beta of this. God, it must be 2 or 3 years ago now.
Oh, it's during lockdown.
Yeah. And we played, it was Dune RPG, or Dune the RPG, I think is its official role-playing game, from Modiphius. And
but in particular, we played the starter set, didn't we? Which is called
Agents of Dune.
Agents of Dune, there we go.
So we played the starter set, which is a very nice glossy starter set, which has done the rounds at Expo a few times now. I think it's been out a couple of years or maybe 1 year. It's not that old, but it uses Modiphius' 2D20 system. I suppose the slight difference with Dune compared to other 2D20s is the way it uses much more of a narrative kind of system. So you have to justify your kind of use of a skill, which is really quite interesting. So, for example, you've got drive statements, which you have to apply if you want to use a particular attribute or skill. So, take an example, you might have faith. You might want to use faith. And if you want to enable your faith skill, and your faith might be you believe wholeheartedly in your house's abilities to do something. And you have to then justify to your GM why that faith applies in that role, which makes for a really good storytelling drive, again, playing this game.
Mm.
All of that set in the background of Dune, which was really hot shit for all of us when the film came back out again, or the remake, whatever it is. Is it remake? It's a remake.
It's a remake because it was a previous film and a TV program. But more that it came to our attention because, of course, part 2 was coming out. Was supposed to come out in October.
Absolutely, it was. So we were going to play it before then, weren't we?
Yeah. Probably worth mentioning, I think we have mentioned how the 2D20 system works, but it is worth mentioning the mechanics. It's called 2D20 because you roll 2D20s. But what you do is you pick 2 types of skill, and this is unanimous across all the games that use this system. So you'll pick one half of the skill and the other half of the skill, and add those 2 numbers together, and you have to roll under that number. So roll under that number gets you a success. Difficulty of the challenge will be a number of successes, like usually 1, 2, or 3. Occasionally it can be even higher, 4 or 5. So if you need 3 successes, you're not going to get them on 2 dice because each dice is only worth 1. So there are 2 ways around that. There are 2 things called your focus, which is if you roll under your focus, if it applies, you get a crit, which means you get 2 successes, or if you roll a natural 1, you get a crit, which is 2 successes. But the other interesting thing is you can buy extra dice. So they have a system called momentum and a system called threat. Momentum is basically you've got momentum in the scene, you're moving forward. So as you gain momentum, you can spend that on extra dice. And what generally tends to happen is the system feeds itself. You use momentum to gain momentum to keep going forward. But if you run out of momentum, you can pay the GM threat to buy more dice, and then he or she can use that to make challenges more difficult, to add more complications, that kind of thing, and buy dice as opposing dice rolls. So there's always this element of trading. Yes, you want to use a threat, and it represents you doing something reckless, basically. You do something reckless, you get threat. I mean, a good example in that is the Star Trek RPG. If you put your phasers to kill rather than stun, you automatically generate threat because you've escalated it. And Dune works in a very, very similar way.
So am I understanding that, sorry, rightly, that when you do threat, then you give the GM dice and they can then use them at any point?
You give them threat points. And then there's a currency system, so momentum and threat work in the same way. So if you want to buy 1 extra dice, it costs you 1. Mm-hmm. If you want to buy 2 extra dice, it costs you 3.
Right.
If you want to buy 4, and so on and so forth, there's this exponential thing, but you can use momentum and threat in slightly different ways. I'm trying to simplify it so we don't just get bogged around it. Yeah. But yeah, it's 2 basically currency pools, one that the players have and one that GM has.
Cool.
And then that is a really good description of the basic 2D20 system. What I think Dune does differently is how it slightly twists that entire system to feed more on the narrative. So like there's some 2D20 systems for me become very mechanical. Like the Star Trek one, for example, is one that's a case in point, which becomes very, very numbers, statistical based. And you're just effectively often picking the most optimal pair of skills you have, even if they don't apply. But whereas in Dune is where the drive statements and the kind of the specific application of the 2D20 system really comes into play for me. And I think it came all the way through the beta. We loved it in the beta, and I think we loved this aspect of it in the Agents of Dune starter set as well. And what was so beautiful about Dune is that it wants you to be narrative, it wants you to tell your story, and it allows you with the momentum system as well to create things in the scene. Not the momentum system only, but in part of your skills and your talents. You can change and influence the scene by one of your traits, or by using momentum. So you could create something in the room, like you're in a corridor and you can use one of your traits or assets and turn the lights off. And that will then apply for the duration of that scene to not only yourselves as your characters, but also what the GM's doing. So it's a really, really clever storytelling mechanism to give people a hook onto it. I just think it's a really, really clever and neat system.
Okay, so that's the system. How was the campaign that you've played? Because you've played all of the starter campaign now, Agents of Dune.
Yeah.
Yes.
So what do you think of the actual story that you told, that you were part of?
Mixed.
Wow. Okay. Because you've
Right.
glowing review of the system.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Agents of Dune, I'm very mixed over. Now, it is designed as a starters system, which means there's quite a lot of hand-holding, especially at the beginning, which is understandable. So when the game is trying to teach you the mechanics, so the first act, I think it was very much a case of, this happens, which means you're going to learn how to use these skills now. This happens, which means you're going to learn how to use this mechanic now.
So it has an inbuilt tutorial.
Yeah.
It had an inbuilt tutorial. And where the game, in my opinion, failed is it kept that tutorial going far too long.
Right.
It didn't open out enough and early enough, and was, in my opinion, obsessed with making mini games.
Yeah.
To the point where it... Dune can be played in a number of ways, and the main rulebook does explain a number of systems. And I can't remember off the top of my head what they're called, but it basically says you have different styles of playing Dune.
You have social conflicts, you have physical conflict, you have all that kind of stuff.
But it even goes to forth and say you actually can change the style, so you can play it more like a traditional RPG where you are following what your players are doing minute to minute, like you would in like a D&D dungeon crawl, or you can play this higher level kind of intrigue thing where you're manipulating the world in the same way like the high level people in Dune are doing. You know what Baron Harkonnen is doing. He's running schemes and again within schemes, that kind of thing. And to me, Dune both as a system and as a theme works best when you're doing that high level schemes within schemes, plotting, scheming, backstabbing your enemy house and pulling them into a trap. But there were places like where, for instance, the tutorial, the Agents of Dune turned into effectively a dungeon crawl. And it's like, I'm not playing Dune to do a dungeon crawl. I'm not interested in it. And I don't want to give away what it was we were doing, but it was effective if you boiled it down. We were moving from room to room, checking the room, making a couple of skill checks, going into the next room.
Right.
And it was just like, I don't want to be doing this. I'm bored of this. There's another point when we actually got to Arrakis and we did spice mining. And spice mining was a mini game.
So what is a mini game then? How does
as in
exactly what it sounds like?
Exactly what it sounds like. It's imagine. I mean, D&D is like the most common touch point.
Yeah.
Imagine playing D&D and then all of a sudden you bring out a sliding puzzle game that everyone has to play.
Right.
Or imagine playing D&D and I go, right, we're now going to a certain form of magical combat, but rather than use the magical combat rules, we're now going to bring out a second little board game and play that.
To determine this thing. Okay, so that, I mean, like...
Determine that thing.
So I think in D&D, because, again, that's a touchstone, like, you're trying to get through this door, and this door has a little puzzle, so you might have the sliding thing. And it's like...
Okay, maybe the sliding puzzle is a wrong example then. Imagine... Oh, this is an example that you're going to love. Imagine playing D&D, and I brought out Trip Lock to do the lock-picking puzzle.
I'd flip the table.
Well, I know you'd flip the table, which is why I picked that as an example. But It's a completely different game.
Yeah.
It's a completely different game with completely different mechanics.
That has no business in there.
Has no business. And when we got to mining spice in June, it was a game of, you can spend some resources to check this, and then you can go here to do that and see what it was. Me and Sid were bored at this point.
But here's the thing. To counter all of what Steve said, there were moments of absolute blinding genius in that starter set.
Yeah.
And it was such a contrasting starter set. It's like nothing I've ever played before in starter set world. And I think that is because the system, Modiphius have seemed to have chosen to showcase every possible way you can play this game in the starter set. And I think that's the detriment of the starter set here.
It sounds a little bit to me that it's almost like this starter set, this campaign, has got too many authors. You've almost got really okay.
I think what it is.
I think Sid's at the point is they've tried to show absolutely everything you can do in June in one box. Right. We mentioned mini games. There's a negotiation section in it, and it's more of an in-baked kind of mini game that's in the basic rules. Whereas the spice harvesting I mentioned was something added extra,
right? More
or less. You do this negotiation. Negotiation works a bit like a board game. You actually set out tokens on the board and you move tokens around. And these tokens are not representing agents moving around. They're representing how your influence has changed amongst people.
Okay.
And that was brilliant.
It was amazing. It was so different and exciting and intriguey and manipulations and how we were playing and interacting as characters with the scene was fantastic. It was just a smorgasbord of really great stuff, and then I think stuff that we just didn't want to play, and that is why we got to be I think is why we got to be really careful about how we exude the system and how good the system is. I don't think our criticism is a system or even the starter set. It's just the way the starter set forces you to try all the elements.
Yeah.
It's like your mum sitting behind you saying you must try everything on your plate. Because it's there. And you know what? I think, in fairness to our group, we gave everything a shot because that's what we wanted to do. We wanted to try the starter set, start to finish. And overall, I really enjoyed it. But if I go back and play Dune again, I now know what I like.
You want to play it without the training wheels now, don't you? And that's... So if you, because you guys were both players in this Dune game, would you want to play it again as a GM? And if so, how much of it would you kind of you don't want to do it at all?
I don't want to play it as a GM. No. As I said, it tried to. I think it tried to tell you too much what the system could be, and couldn't pick. It couldn't pick something, and go and stick it and really highlight what that was. And as I said, I think the whole game worked better when you were doing the intrigue. Even that whole, as I said, that negotiation is like a game where you were abstracting how negotiations go in. We were still role-playing that. We were still saying that such and such does someone, passes a message to someone, which is where that token moves over there. You've passed that test to move the token to there. And it was just a way of, that became a way of just keeping an eye on how things are progressing. I really wouldn't want to run that again because I felt the beginning far too constricted, and I don't think it let the training wheels off early enough, and then it bogged it down with stuff that wasn't interesting. And fair dues to Derek, who was running it for us. Derek did cut out stuff when he realised that we weren't enjoying it. So he did enough to make sure we'd all seen everything, but he said, like, this, there was one bit, and I think it might have even been Spice Harvest, and he says, you're supposed to do that another 2 times. And we're like, oh my God, we don't spend another 2 weeks doing that. Which would have driven us mad.
I suppose bringing this to a close then, really, is what are your thoughts on playing the next game, the next campaign in this system? I assume there is another campaign book out there.
There's actually several, but I think there is a campaign which follows directly on from this campaign, so you can actually carry on with the same house.
Okay.
Masters of Dune, I think?
Yes, I believe it's Masters of Dune, but I could be wrong. I'd be very interested to see what it is. But now this is where this is an issue, I think, with role-playing game campaigns. Someone's going to have to buy that and read it before we can determine whether we want to play it.
Mm.
Well, here's the thing. I think, actually, now that we all know what we like about it as a group, any future implementation could be adjusted to suit our tastes. And this is what I think is actually... There is the good thing about the starter set, as I think for folk that are dabbling or first to this, maybe somebody just bought it because of the franchise, wants to play, never played an RPG in their life, you'd get everything you need in the box. And you would be given a sample of such a complex environment, and you would be held your hand through it. So I think, because we wanted to experience it all, we made sure we tried it all. But if we went back and did starter set again, there's nothing to say we couldn't bin some of it and change it or play it differently. But we know the story now.
Yeah.
We've built our house. We've gone through that house. To go and play it again would lose something for me, which is why I don't want to go and play Agents of Dune again. But I would still recommend it to people that want the Dune experience, because it does give you a hell of a good Dune experience. I think it's just those... If you want to be playing free and loose with tons and tons of agency, then Dune Starter Set isn't the starter set for you, because it doesn't give you that freedom and that agency that you want. On the other hand, if you've never played a game before and you really are genuinely starting, it's a cracking starter set. And the physical starter set is gorgeous. The artwork in it is amazing. It looks good. It's got little standees, and it's got little board, like play mats for all the different kind of ways you can play the game and stuff like that. It is a sight to behold. It is absolutely stunning. And I just don't... I think we wanted that narrative freedom and agency that we loved about the beta playtest. And I think we only got pockets of that in this game, which is what made it an up and down starter set for us. I'm not doing the next segue, though.
No?
Well, in which case I will do it. We have been talking for now, so let's go into our mailbag and answer some questions before we are at the end, or near the end of the podcast. In fact, going back to that musical term, we're at the coda of the podcast.
Wow, okay. I didn't even know it was a thing.
It's quite a full bag this week as well, isn't it?
It is. We're not going to answer all of these, I don't think. We'll answer just a couple, though. So I'm going to pick a question. But I will ask, since we have just mentioned Dune and we said there was elements of RPG and elements of board game in there in the mini games, James McCann asks, easy question, which game, if any, has best merged RPG mechanics and board games?
None, for me. They don't work together.
Ooh.
It's one or the other. Pick one, right? Just stop sitting on the fence. You'll get sore arse. They're different things and they work differently. And I know you're gonna start talking about like games like what Tainted Grail and all that.
Well,
kind of
I was about to say
right?
Tainted Grail or Sleeping Gods. Does that not marry the gap for you?
Do you have full freedom of changing your character? You might as well play a solo RPG, boss.
just because I do a really bad Jamaican accent when I was playing Sleeping Gods. That makes it an RPG.
No, you don't have the freedom. You don't have the flexibility. You don't have the flexibility to change the game.
Ironically, what you're saying is why it doesn't work is exactly the bits we didn't like about Dune, Agents of Dune. Because when it got a bit too board gamey and constrained you too much, it's like, well, that's not when we play RPGs.
And
to be fair, there is a balance there. That kind of RPG where the solution is built, is baked in. And we're seasoned RPG players. We know to let our players have freedom. But if it's like, I don't know, the only way of opening the door to the Harkonnen cell is by hacking the key code, then you are approaching Tainted Grail, Sleeping Gods territory, in which case the things start to blur. I've said it before, the whole thing of can you snog the dragon?
Yeah.
Can you do the crazy thing? Is if you can't get the keypad, is there a way of hacking something else? Is there a way of getting in for the window? Can you drill from below or something daft like that? But they have asked, what does it? James has asked, which game, if any, has best merged the mechanics? And I think we've just mentioned them. I think Tainted Grail, Sleeping Gods are the closest that merge the two mechanics, personally.
What do they merge for you? What do you think?
Because it's merging the storytelling and the character advancement aspect. And so Tainted Grail is a very good example. There are elements of the story which relate to your character.
Yeah.
You're not playing green pawn number one. You're not playing a role in like Pandemic, where your role is just basically a skill.
Yeah.
The role in the Pandemic, you mentioned about the soldier does this, that's his ability, that's what he does. Whereas, like, for instance, we played Tainted Grail the other night, my character was Maggot, the wizard. There were certain locations you go to and it was like, if you're Maggot, you read this verse. If you're someone else, you read this verse.
Yeah.
At that point, it's not just a skill, it's the character is deeply built into the story, and so things happen. So yes, you're not going to get the full freedom of movement. You're going to end up with that branching choices that you do on any kind of choose your own adventure style game. But I think that, to me, is the closest you're going to get in a board game.
Yeah. Okay, I see that, and that's a very good point, and I can't help but agree with it.
There is the other end, because if you're talking is D&D as your starting point, there is an argument that says D&D is really just a combat simulator, and to a lot of games, especially the old school D&D from like the 80s and the early 90s, the roleplay bits was just the bits which joined the combat together.
Yeah, that's very true.
In which case, you can say the games that best use these RPG mechanics, the best use that tactical combat really well. So things like Oathsworn, which adds a bit of story. Things like Kingdom Death Monster, again, which adds this cooperative team-based combat in there.
Yeah.
Gloomhaven, which is just it's a done. Ironically, there's a really fascinating one for you. Gloomhaven. The Gloomhaven RPG uses exactly the same mechanics as the Gloomhaven board game. It's a card-based combat system where you have to play two cards, pick the top, pick the bottom.
Okay.
Which I'm fascinated how that's going to work outside of combat. Or is it just going to be like D&D, some people's versions of D&D, where everything outside of combat is just a route to the next combat?
Yeah.
So if we were to break this down then, and we were to say the mechanics that we think are RPG mechanics are things like storytelling, character advancement,
I think to eventually reiterate what Steve said, is it's the immersion of that character in that world. The fact that your character shapes the world rather than, because I think with a lot of the board games, that world is just going to carry on, whether your character influences it or not. But in an RPG, you really should change the world.
I like that.
That's heavy.
Yeah.
I like that.
That's a kind of philosophical, heavy answer we are known for.
No, I like Oathsworn because it's pretty. It's nice, isn't it?
Look at those minis for.
Go on, someone else. Send us a question. Pick a question. We've got a few minutes left.
Are you planning, from Budge Wilson, of doing a show at AirCon? It would be good to see you live again. And that's interesting for a couple of reasons.
That's interesting for a couple of reasons. At the moment, 3 of us are heading to AirCon, I believe. Yeah. I have booked a hotel. I believe Sid has booked a hotel, but let's not talk about that. We can ask him about that later after a few drinks. So yes, we will be there. I don't know. I need to speak to Matt Cook to see what's happening. But at the moment, there are no plans. But we'll see. But we will be there, and hopefully we can get a game win of something.
Nice.
In 4 days, I bloody well hope so.
4 days.
4 days. I hope you get to play a game.
Yes.
But it's interesting because we might hopefully be going back to the UK Games Expo to do another podcast.
With any luck.
With any luck. Because we did one last year and I feel like it was very well received. And we had a lot of fun. And I think we got to meet a load of listeners and you seem to all enjoy it. So if the powers that be at the UK Games Expo have any say in this, then yeah, we will be back live there. But I think I really want to try and get some more cons this year. And whenever I go, I'm going to be representing PHC. Be nice to go along and see more and do more. I don't know about Aircon. Aircon just happens at an awkward time of year for me. Mm. But I am planning to go to the to Boldly Game this weekend.
What's that one? Oh, this weekend.
Right, this weekend. So
which will be before this podcast goes out live.
Maybe. Do you know what? I might even listen to this podcast as I'm driving if I'm late. But yeah, so I'm hoping to go to Boldly Game and yeah, definitely UK Games Expo and hopefully one of the Aircons.
Oh yeah, there's many
now. Yeah.
Yes. Sid, pick us a question and we might use that to close the episode.
So, Bez asks, how do you feel if a game lets you make terrible moves? And then in brackets, games that let you essentially lose on the first turn without safety rails.
I have two very strong opinions about this. I am absolutely fine as long as I'm not the person that makes that mistake. Right? However, and it has happened to me, it's a game I'm not going to talk about and I'm never going to play it again. If I'm the person that makes that mistake and ruins the game, I sulk for the rest of the afternoon.
Yeah.
I've seen you do that.
Yeah, I do that as well. Yeah.
Hang on, you've seen me do that. I wasn't talking about any of the games we've played, Sid.
I've seen you sulk.
Oh yeah, there is.
I'm just extrapolating from that, mate. And that was over nothing quite as heavy as that.
No.
I think it's worth mentioning Bez's second question, which is what, Sid?
And Bez's second question, how do you think about strategy tips in instructions?
Now, I'm going to redirect it slightly, because I think it comes back to the first question.
Oh, okay.
Which is, what really bores my piss is when somebody teaches me a game who has played the game before and allows me to lose the turn on the first game.
Yeah.
Lose the game on the first turn. And now, strategy tips in the rule book, I'm not usually bothered about. There's only usually one person who reads the rule book anyway. However, if you know the game and you know there's ways to screw it up, I think you are honor bound to let very basic strategy tips be learnt as you teach the game. For instance, don't do this first. You're going to be screwed. Make sure you've got food by the end of the round. Yeah. And then when people aren't getting food, you're playing the curriculums, no one's got enough food. Don't forget, you're going to need food by the end of the round.
Yeah.
That little thing. And it really winds me up when people teach you the game but don't teach you any of the strategy, and you come to the end of the round and they go, oh, you didn't get food, well, you now get minus 10 victory points. You could have reminded me.
That's really interesting. So you're happy for a game to let you fail, but you're not happy for your fellow players to let you fail.
Due to an experience,
yes. But I also think that also comes with the rule book. I think if I read the rules, I think... Yeah, I agreeing with what Bez is saying here. I think if there is a way to really absolutely catastrophically ruin your game, they should be kind of flagged in the rule book. Bear in mind, at the end of this season, whatever it is, you need to have food, and that will be there, and that is there in the Agricola rule book. But when you're reiterating that to somebody, it's not going to be as clear because I'm not going to underline and bold the words I'm saying to you. I'm not going to put it in a little breakout box. I think it's absolutely fine if a rule book says, this is really important, you need to do this.
It's because you've given up your ability to influence it yourself, haven't you? That's what it is. You put yourself in the hands of the person teaching you the game, and therefore you're dependent on them emphasising the right bits of information or nudging you in the right direction a bit more.
I'm fine with this. If it's everyone's first game and somebody screws up, then we all could have screwed up there. I'm fine with that. And if it's me that does it, it's fine. I poked the game, I learnt the rules, I learnt not to do that. As I said, what winds me up is when somebody already knows how to play the game and they let me do it and then basically go, well, you're not going to win now, are you? Yeah. Because you did that. Whereas I make a point of going to people, are you sure you want to do that? Because it will have this effect. And if they want to carry on, that's up to them.
I think we use food as a really good example. Thinking about Zolkin, again, you need to feed all your workers at the end of every age. You can choose not to do it, and that does come with a consequence, but maybe you'll need that consequence. And I think that needs to be iterated to the player. And again, it is iterated to the player that in the rulebook, you can do this, you shouldn't do it, but you can do it. I think that's what you need in the rulebook. You need to have that flag. I was thinking as you were talking then, Steve, have we played a game where we've gotten something really wrong, or we've gone, hang on, should we restart this?
Me and you haven't. Me and Andy definitely have.
I think I've done it fairly recently where I'm playing a game and I was like, I've done something wrong, or everyone around the table has got something wrong and had to restart. And that's always a bit disappointing where something hasn't been made clear.
We thought we'd done that on White Castle, I think, and it ended up we were just both rubbish.
Yeah. And we did it also on Barcelona. Was it Barcelona? Or Gollum?
Oh, Gollum. Yes, we haven't mentioned Gollum. We were thinking about mentioning Gollum today, yes. We both did very badly, and we both made the same mistake. But we played the game in about an hour, so we reset and played again, thinking, oh no, we know what we're doing. I'll be worse the second time round with our knowledge of what we're supposed to be doing.
But I think that's good. Going back to Bez's question, the rule book doesn't really give you the safety tips to go avoid falling into this problem.
And Gollum is an interesting one because it's by the same publisher as Barrage, and I think Barrage has the same problem. It's easy to completely screw up your game quite early on in both of them. And yeah, but Gollum's really fascinating because although I still don't know how to do well in that game, I know the 1 in a million ways you can screw up your game.
Yeah.
And I'd like to play that with more players. I need to play it with I'd like to play it with Sid and Andy to get a feel of how that works with more people. And I don't think we can offer many strategy tips. I think we can only just say, look, we screwed up because of this last time.
Yeah.
But see, that's
just be careful of it.
That's an interesting one then. So strategy tips and instructions is an odd one for me, right? I'll tell you why because I often haven't read the book. Yeah. And I never will read the book because if it's not my game, I'm not going to turn up somebody's house and then go, do you know what? Just give us 20 minutes while I have a brew and a read through this book before we can start the game.
Yeah. Which is why I say it's important for the person teaching the game to go through those basic strategy tips as well.
I mean, think about when we played Obsession the other week. I was doing a bit more of a teach on that. Steve, you knew a bit, and I think I kept pointing you guys back to the image that's in the rulebook, which is the pie chart. This is where the majority of your points, end game points, are going to be scored. So these are the things you need to prioritise doing throughout the game. And I think that as a strategy tip in the rulebook for Obsession is absolutely brilliant. Especially when you've got these complicated Euros where you can get lots of points from lots of places, to know that most of the time in most games, your points are going to be developed in A, B, and C. The other ones are going to give you some, but most of them are here. So don't forget to focus on these three things. That is a solid strategy tip. And one well worth putting in the rulebook.
I believe that's all we have time for this week. So we do have a little bit of a teaser for next week, as we are going to talk about Scrolls of the South Tigris because Andy's here. And there's a whole bunch of questions we've left because Andy really needs to get involved in them because it'd be rude not to really with some of them. But that'll be in the next episode in a few weeks. So it just leaves me to say thank you very much for listening, dear listener. If you enjoyed us, please give us a review on iTunes or share us with your friends or engage with us on the social medias. That's what drives the algorithm. Comments, likes, calling someone an idiot for being in Japan and having the holiday of a lifetime, that kind of thing, you know. So we're on Facebook, Instagram, X. We're on Threads. We're actually getting some engagement on Threads, which is interesting. We've also on Board Game Geek Guild 2726. But until next time, happy gaming.
Cheerio.
Bye-bye.
He's not here.
No,
he's confused me.
I know he's not here. I love the fact the last 2 podcasts, Andy has crashed the outro, and this time he's not here, and you just forget to say goodbye.
What? Because I'm waiting for him to get in my way.